welcome to my studio. Come on in. Okay, so we're over at the far wall. The shredder is at my feet. You can just see there. Yeah. And this entire wall is blank. Nothing on it at all. Blank canvas, shall we say. So I will be putting up paintings there eventually. I do have another couple of pictures in the room which I will show you, but that particular wall has nothing on it at all. So it sits just behind my easel, the large easel that's in the room. But this wall I thought would be great to put bookshelves on. Now I'm not going to put heaps and heaps of shelves. I don't want to lose the light that's in the room. This entire room is painted white and I need it bright and airy to paint in. It's north facing room, which sometimes you wouldn't think would be too good for painting, but it's actually very good because although I'm not getting the full sunlight in the room, I'm getting very even light. It doesn't change much through the day, even in the winter. Coming into the winter, I'm having to use some lights as well. But yeah, I mean, during the year, during the summer, it's very, very bright, even light, so it doesn't change much, which is really good. So yeah, I'm going to put some shelves here, some bookshelves. I'm thinking about 3. I have been debating whether to get freestanding or just put shelves on the wall. I think I'm going to go for the putting the shelves on the wall option, and put a set of 3 shelves to put. I don't want my house or my shelves full of stuff that I just have because I've read. I want these 3 shelves. I'm going to limit myself to 3 shelves. I want to keep them at 3 and keep them with books that I just love and things that I just love. That's what I'm trying to do. Just trying to declutter the house and just, yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put shelves up there. Yeah. So the next thing is, I'll just turn you around again. There, and then just down about the middle of the room is my tall standing easel. I don't use it to paint as such. I wouldn't stand at that easel and paint, because I don't stand to paint. Basically, I sit to paint. I have a desktop easel for painting. Moving round, we have my shelves. So I'll give you a quick overview of the shelves and then we'll go into them in more detail. I tidied my studio last week. It was starting to get cluttered. This particular set of shelves is what I keep my working supplies on, what I'm using a lot of the time. So they're easy. I'm sitting on the chair here, I can just swing round and grab whatever I need. Or when I'm setting up for the day, it's easy to grab whatever I need. So we're going to go forward and take a closer look. So this first top shelf is really for, just nice things. Plus my paintbrushes. Well, my larger paintbrushes probably is a better way of putting it. Anyway, this first, that is an oil painting that I've done. It hasn't been varnished. I've set it out there before I was varnished. You should really only varnish your oil paints. You need to leave them at least 3 months before you varnish them. So that's been sitting there waiting for varnish. Yes, I'm quite happy with that. It kind of lives there now. Yeah, pretty pleased with that. Then nice to have my artwork around me. Next is actually a little Bible verse that I have to remind me of what's important and what this actually says. I don't know if the camera can pick it up. It says, "The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms." And that comes from Deuteronomy 33:27. So that's always sitting there in the room. This little ornament I got in Holland. which you can probably gather it's a little clog. I think it's actually an ashtray. It's got a little dent on the back of it. I bought that many years ago on a school trip to Holland when I was 10 years old, and it had been in my parents' house for quite a number of years, but for some reason, I can't remember how or why now, it has ended up here, so I've just put it up there, and it reminds me of that time when I went to Holland when I was about 10 years old, school trip and all that. But I do remember that we went to the Van Gogh Museum at that time, and that really made a huge impression on me with art. I love Van Gogh's paintings. Don't like all of his paintings, but I do love many of them, and just so vibrant and so colourful. That's what I really like about them, is vibrancy, and his colours are just incredible, and they really speak to me. I just love his work. This next item, shall we say, was made ceramic. It was made by a friend of mine who makes ceramics, and it is actually a little bookworm, and it's on a plinth, and there's a couple of books, and top half of them is a little man, and the back is a worm, and he's leaning on his books, so he's a bookworm, and he's got his little pair of glasses here. So that was made for me I should say, and I really like that, so he's quite happy sitting there. So next are my pots for my water. So I'll use these when I'm using either my watercolour or acrylic. And in the big pot at the back there, I keep some of the bigger brushes, bigger flat brushes, bright brushes. Yeah. Oh, that one feels as if it hasn't been rinsed out properly. Not a very good brush mummy there. Anyway, and a ruler. That's the top shelf covered. Moving down underneath, let's give you an overview again. I've got 3 baskets with different items. The first item, I'll just pull it down to show you. First basket. It contains some spare acrylic paints and oil paints. I've got the acrylic this side, my oil the other side. These are paints that I would use reasonably regularly, but they're not in my... See, I have paints in these bags which I'm using all the time, so when a colour runs out of those, this is a slight overstock of paints. So when I run out of something that's in the bag, I go to my basket to see what I have and try and make sure I don't run out. That's a little watercolour, Payne's Grey. But these are oil colours. These are acrylic. Then at the back I have varnish for acrylic. Slow dry and medium, which helps to, you mix it in with your acrylic paint to help it, to stop it drying so quickly, because it's very hard to blend acrylic paint because it dries so quickly. So if you add that into it as you're painting, it helps to give you time to blend the paint when you're, or to blur the paint, to blend it whenever it's on the canvas. That is a low odour solvent. For quite often we'd use that in the first layer of an oil paint. It'll make your oil paint dry very quickly. You'll be able to work on top of it within half an hour after you mixing your oil paint a little bit with that. It will make your oil paint a little bit dull, but I would only ever use it in the first layer. You always put the thinner layers on the bottom of oil and then work to thick. That is an oil painting varnish. Oh, that one was particularly strong in smell, if I can remember correctly. Was it that one? Oh, I'll have to try that out again. I'm going to try that out again on the ballerina's foot that I showed you. So I'll try that out and see. I'll just make sure the room's well ventilated when I'm using that. Then moving on. This one is for more dry supplies. So I've got masking tape. Parcel tape for some reason is in here. I've got charcoal, scissors, clips for clipping paper to boards, surgical gloves for whenever I'm washing out palettes and things. Picture hanging hooks, picture hanging cord, gel pen, white pastel pen, screwdriver for fitting the hooks to the back of frames, and a fan brush. So that's, oh, and at the back there is this, that is brilliant stuff. That is what I will use to clean my brushes, whether I'm using acrylic or oil. It's very, very good. It's like a soap, and I will rinse my brushes thoroughly, then really lather them up with this soap and just leave them to sit, well, for a few hours, maybe even overnight, and then whenever I come back, rinse them out the next morning, and they're clean and ready to go. That all the paint is gone. I find that is the easiest thing to clean oil paint with. I know people use solvent, they'll use spirit and stuff like that, but I find that very harsh. I find it very hard on the senses, hard on the lungs and the breathing. So I use that, and it's so gentle, and yet it works really, 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 really well. So I prefer that to the like of white spirit. Third basket, there's even less in it. It's got my apron and some really large brushes. That is actually a makeup brush, which I'll use dry to help blend or blur acrylic paint, like a mop brush. That I actually got that for, no, that is an art brush. Got it in an art store. It's not for painting walls, but it is for very large pieces. And I got it for a specific thing in our local church, but I've only really used it once. Another couple of brushes. That's Bob Ross brush, again for slightly larger pieces. And a water brush. You put your water in there. I've been using it a few times for ink and watercolour. I find those quite good. A few other bits and bobs in the bottom there, a few other brushes. Don't really have a home. They stay there. Oh, those are rake brushes. Rake brushes are, I must do a video about different types of brushes. Rake brushes are good for maybe doing animal fur, that kind of thing. Gives you not so much, it gives you more uneven stroke. I've got a medium one there and a smaller one. Yeah, so they're pretty good. They're particularly good when they get a wee bit more worn. So onto the third shelf. And we have a couple of watercolour palettes that haven't been cleaned out. Watercolour paint, these were out of tubes. These were tubes of watercolour paint. And watercolour paint, once you've squirted some out onto the palettes, they're good to go. You know, you can just clean off the rest of the palette and they'll harden onto the palette, and they're good to go. You can use them until they're very, unlike acrylic paint, once they harden, that's it, you've got to throw them out. But these here, once they harden them, you just clean your palette around it and they're good to go again. So these are ceramic palettes, which I find best for watercolour and for mixing and for cleaning as well. Much better, easier to clean. Some pencils and pens and things. Another pencil roll for some colour pencil work. Tin of graphite pencils. Tin of Rembrandt colour pencils. These are amazing. These are watercolour pencils. Not the cheapest things in the world. They're pretty, they're expensive enough. I have a feeling this particular set of 18 was about, I think it was about £40 here in the UK. But they are beautiful. Really, really good. So I can use those. I like detailed work. So I can use these in conjunction with the watercolours to put in more detail. I particularly like using these if I'm doing, you know, the eyes and ears of an animal. I can get really into fine detail with those. So they are amazing. They're beautiful, beautiful, and beautiful colours. I'll not show you those. Those are some of my old school photographs, which I was doing some self-portraits. Don't want to inflict that on you. Graphitint pencils. These are graphite pencils with just a little hint of colour. I've used them a few times. I find them hard to sharpen into a real sharp point, so I've only used them a few times. I'll maybe try working with them again and see how I go, because I like the concept, you know, of getting that subtle colour with just, you know, getting the graphite look, but just having that hint of colour. And another tin of 24 graphite pencils. I used to do a lot of pencil work. Haven't been using pencils as much lately. That's where I started with my art. I started drawing. Loved the drawing, really got into drawing. And that really is the basis. In fact, it was Van Gogh that said it was the foundation that you needed. You needed good drawing skills. And I agree. If you can't draw, your paintings are only going to be as good as your drawing skills. So very, very important. I spent almost a year just drawing before I even lifted a paintbrush. So it's well worth the effort of doing that. And I love it. I love drawing. It's it's a slow working medium. It's good. It trains you in patience. It trains you in building your work up. So I'll actually, while we're on that subject, I'll show you a drawing that I have framed on my wall that I did a while back. And here it is, or should I say here he is. This is a drawing I did a few years back now. I called the piece The Boss. It perhaps took me a couple of months work on this, gradually building up layers and layers of pencil to get the 3D look. I really enjoyed it, and I was really pleased with the way he came out. And he greets me. That's the door into the room. So whenever I come in, he greets me every time. And yeah, I really enjoyed working on him. And I'll just try and go in here and let you see it in maybe a little bit more detail. Next we have toilet bags. But I keep paints in these, and it's good. These were good too. They're good for keeping the paints in, keeping them from messing everything up. But they were also good for travelling whenever I was going to, when I say travelling, I mean whenever I was going to any art classes that I went to. They were great for carrying your paints in. I noticed in the classes that the women always carried toilet bags and the men always carried toolboxes. So it was quite, yeah. Anyway, toilet bags. This one is for my acrylic paints. So you can see there, that's my basic range of acrylic paint. Yeah. Few different brands and stuff, but that's the paints that I've been using all the time. And aside, there is an overstock of some of the colours in that basket, the first basket there. So that bag is acrylic. This one is for oils. These are all my oil paints. Same idea, just a different bag, different type of paint. I also have my little bottle of Liquin in there. So Liquin is good for your middle to top layers, as I said before in the other basket. For the very first layer, quite often you would use the, very first layer of my oil paint, I would use this low odour mineral spirit. Very first layer, very thin application, just getting some ground colour down, very first sort of shapes and things into the painting. Use that. Means it's dry enough to work on top of after about an hour. Then your next layers of paint, middle to top layers, I would use liquid. Obviously with oil paints you don't use water, with acrylic you do, but instead of water you would use the like of that load or mineral spirit, or in the middle to top layers I would use this product called liquid. And if you mix it with the paint, it'll a little bit each time with your paint, it will enable the paint to flow, go onto the canvas much more smoothly. Plus it has the added benefit of it helps the oil paint dry a lot quicker. So if you're using, like, you have to do your oil paint in layers, you can only go so far, and then you have to stop painting and let it dry before you can go on another layer. And liquid is great for that, because what happens is when you mix that with your paint, it's dry enough to paint on top of again within 24 hours. So it really speeds up the drying time of oil paint, but yet still gives you enough time to blend and play around with the paint on the canvas. So it's a really, really good product. The only downside with liquid is it does stink a bit. Not a great smell at all. Need to use a ventilated room, but it's really good to use with your oil paints. Highly recommend it. So that's in there along with the rest of the paints. So the next couple of bags, we have another 2 bags here. And this one is where I keep my watercolours. So all my watercolours are in here. There's also a bottle of masking fluid, which I would use reasonably regularly for blocking out white areas in the watercolour painting. There's a little palette there. Little palette, Winsor Newton, I think it is, watercolour. That was the very first set of watercolours I got. They're okay. It's mainly the tubes that I use now. I find them much handier and easier to control. So yeah, something stuck to the bottom there. Different colours. My usual vibrant cool palette. So there, yeah, watercolour paints. This little bag here contains a little bit of magic and has my inks, watercolour ink. Inks come 2 different types of ink as far as I'm aware. There's water-based ink and alcohol-based ink. I use the watercolour-based ink because there's no smell of it. Plus, it works and mixes really, really well with watercolour paint. And I find it's like using watercolour, only the colours are even more vibrant and more, they just pop even more. And I really, really love working with them and mixing with them. But you do need to use them sparingly, otherwise the painting can get too garish. Of course, the colours you pick are another thing. I do like vibrant, bright, cool colours. So the first colour I have here is quinacridone magenta, and you need so little of these. They're also good for putting in a watercolour pen that I showed you earlier and just putting little bits here and there in your painting. Don't have too many of these. I've got quinacridone magenta. Well, that's actually silver. It just needs to be mixed a bit. I have cadmium yellow. That's gold. And phthalo blue. So that's like, you see, those are like your 3 primary colours. Instead of red, I've got quinacridone magenta, I've got cadmium yellow and phthalo blue, and then I can mix those to make other colours. So it's win-win, plus my gold and silver just to add a little bit of sparkle. Next up is some more acrylic paint, really. It's my cadmium yellow paint because I've got it in a tub. That's the white gesso. Useful for if you start a painting with your acrylic paints and decide, nah, it's not going too well like that canvas I was showing you earlier. Just gesso over it. It's very, very thick, smooth, and white, and it just covers over anything really like a dream without having to put layer upon layer upon layer. It will cover most things really well. It's so thick and so opaque. It's brilliant stuff to have in an emergency. Glazing medium. I've got two different glazing mediums. I have the Winsor Newton and the Liquitex. I'm going to do a video about glazing. Instead of lightening a colour, say, now these are for acrylic. Instead of lightening a colour with acrylic paint with using white, which is going to just keep it opaque, if you add a little bit of glazing medium to your paint, it's not going to change the colour, but it's going to make it very, 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 very translucent. And then you can put that over areas in your painting, and it still lets the colour of whatever it is underneath and whatever it is you've painted underneath shine through, but you've got this extra layer of colour on top, and you can put glazes on top of glazes on top of glazes and get very, very amazing effects. And you will add such depth to your painting with glazing. It's really good to experiment with as well. I was using that Liquitex one. I found it to be very good. The only thing with glazing medium, and it's not a problem for me, but it could be a problem for some people, is that it does have like a satin sheen to it. So, which is fine, but you either need to glaze your whole paint. Acrylic paint is matte. So if you're using something with a satin sheen to it and you're only using it in parts of your painting, you're going to get wee bits of your painting that are matte and some that are shiny, and it doesn't look right. What I do, because I do it anyway, and it's the easiest fix for this, is if you have been glazing certain parts of your painting, in order to give it a complete uniform feel once you've finished your painting, once you've finished your glazing, is to then just put 2 layers of varnish over the whole thing, and that just evens out the whole process. It evens out the whole painting and just gives everything a lovely nice satin sheen, and also makes your colours pop and also protects it from UV light. So I really don't know why you wouldn't varnish. Varnishing is definitely the way to go. And it's certainly the way to go if you're going to be using glazing medium, because it just evens out that whole tone and makes your painting look amazing. So that's 2 different brands just. And then I've got black paint at the back. Don't use black paint really, certainly not very often. Another video coming about that. And finally, the bottom shelf, we have more brushes. These are really spare brushes. These brushes are actually brand new, have never been used. So they're spare brushes as I wear other ones out. There's also the palette knives as well, which I don't use very often. And then in at the back here, I've got sponge brushes. Don't use those very often either, but they're there if I want them. Baby wipes, clean the hands. They get too mucky and I don't want to go to the bathroom straight away. Bottom shelf here, I've got different kinds of watercolour paper. And a couple of folders with pieces of work that I haven't finished yet, that I've maybe just started and the kind of way I need left to the side for a while. Bottom shelf, magazine, I've been reading, Christmas card. Palettes. Actually, these are Stay Wet palettes, good for acrylic paint. We'll probably do a video at some point about how to use those. I use one for acrylic and one actually for oil. When I'm using one for oil, they're not meant for oil. But what I do is I put tin foil on the bottom of them, put my oil paint on, then I've got a lid for the oil paint. It'll keep the oil paint good for a good few days. Plus tin foil on the bottom is easy clean up. Just scrunch tin foil up, throw out whatever's left. It's great. No clean up. Always about making life easier. And then that's the papers for the Stay Wet palette. And that's basically it in that shelf. Yeah, so that's my working shelves that I use every day. So this is the other side of my room. I've got my table, waste paper bin underneath. On the floor there is my desktop easel with that board that's on it is the watercolour, the board that I use for watercolour. I only use that board flat though on the desk. The stand top, the tabletop easel is for acrylic paints. There's a tripod in behind it. Doesn't actually belong to me, but I'm borrowing it for the moment. And then table with my lights on it. Just especially this time of the year, I need lights to light my work as I'm working. And then, just moving on up here, this is my desk that I use to work at most of the time. iPad stand behind it for reference photos. If I'm working and I need a reference photo to help, I'll set it there while I work on the desk below. It's my glasses case sitting there. Yeah, so that's good too. Yeah, so that's my workspace. Then I have another place for brushes. I'll show you that now. This little tray, it's actually a computer desk. This tray pulls out, and this is where I keep my brushes for acrylic and oils that I use all the time. These ones are mainly acrylic and these ones are oil brushes. Oil brushes tend to be more stiff, more not as much, they're not as pliable as the acrylic ones. And also then I have my watercolour brushes here, which again are even more pliable. Yeah, so that's all my brushes. This is an acrylic painting I did of Dunnottar Castle in Scotland. The reference photo from this was from wildlifereferencephotos.com, which provides royalty-free photographs for artists. So this is the painting that I did from that. Yeah, Dunnottar Castle. It worked out quite well. It is acrylic paint. It's an acrylic painting and it is varnished. So it does, the camera probably doesn't pick it up, but it does have a slight satin sheen to it, which just makes the colour pop. And yeah, so it sits above my desk. So I hope you enjoyed that studio tour, guys. Maybe give you an insight into maybe how you can set up your own or take ideas or anything like that. In behind here is where I'm going to put the bookshelves. I'll probably move that easel over a bit and put the bookshelves there. Or I might put them here. Don't know, they'll go somewhere anyway because that whole wall, as I say, is blank, so I have plenty of room for some shelves. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Thank you so much. And I'll see you again next time. Bye!